Welcome to the first ever episode of Skin Talks with me, Dr. Sina Gadiri, a dermatologist based in the UK and a keen explorer of how we as humans view our skin away from the lens of dermatology and medicine. In this opening episode, I have with me Emma Downer, a home DIY expert on a mission to make DIY accessible to everyone, and with an audience of almost 1 million across all platforms. Emma, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here today. How are you doing?
Thank you so much for having me on. I am delighted to come and talk to you about this today.
Excellent. So we've got a bit of an introductory question from my side. So what got you into DIY and what was the kind of key motivator towards starting out on your journey?
Great question. So I bought my current house at the start of 2019 and I started doing some DIY, all self-taught. I would go and learn from YouTube or anywhere that I could find it, which wasn't many places back in 2019. And by the time the start of 2020 came along, we all went into our first lockdown, which you may recall.
Oh, I recall that very, very vividly. Yeah,
We all remember that
I
time.
know.
And people discovered that they couldn't have tradespeople come into their house to do any of the work that they needed anymore, and were stuck with all sorts of DIY problems that they couldn't solve. And so, having learnt what I did over that year, started to create videos for people that I thought would be helpful. And they might say, "Oh, what tool did you use there?" Or, "What was the technique? How did you get to that stage?" So I would
Mm.
create how-to videos, or just even tool reviews or DIY hacks that I'd come across as I was doing it. Just trying to help people out, really, trying to, help people feel a little bit more empowered. And it kind of went from there.
That's when you know you're onto something, isn't it? Someone comes up to you and says, "How do you do this?" And when you get the same thing like 2, 3, 4 times, and you're just like, maybe there is a gap here, and people need to have like instructional videos, and that you can start something. I'm sure that kind of clicked in your brain at that point as well, right?
Absolutely. And people often say to me, like, "Oh, how do you come up with ideas for videos of what to publish?" And I say, "I don't. My audience tell me what they want, and I make the
Oh, it's
video."
beautiful. That's
Easy
beautiful.
as that.
No, that's
To make
great.
it easy for me.
So, is skincare or skin health in general at all important to anyone who does DIY for a living, and why?
Well, I think it absolutely is important, and you'll be shocked to learn that I haven't been taking very good care of my skin at all, because I
Don't say that to a dermatologist. Oh
know
no.
I'm terrible,
I'm
and
joking. It's fine. I'm sure. I'm not sure it's not
it's
that
a
bad.
crime. It's a crime. Well, I think the reason that that's the case is because I've always been someone who I think has been very lucky with their skin, and I know that because I have friends who have always had acne throughout their entire life and are currently going
Hmm.
through having different facial treatments to try and like reduce the scarring and things like that. And we talked about it, and I said to her, "It's funny hearing you talk about this because it makes me realize that I have never thought about my face in that way. I don't think about my skin at all." Um,
I mean, that
having
can
said
sometimes be a good thing. The
that,
blissful obliviousness of I don't need to think about it, and let life carry on in a sense, right?
I know. I mean, it's very blissful, but it is in some ways a bit of a trap because there are
Hmm.
certainly things in DIY that are really important to think about. And in particular, an example might be cement poisoning. So, cement is one of the compounds used in either making mortar or making concrete,
Hmm.
and the powder, when wet, has the ability to burn your skin. So once it's in contact with your skin, perhaps you've just dropped a bit on there and you haven't noticed, and 20 minutes later
Wow.
you realize it's there because it
Yeah.
starts to sting, because it burns your skin, and it's not good for you.
That's an interesting one. I've not had too many patients come into me and say, "Doctor, I think I've been cement poisoned." And if they came up to me with that, I'd be like, "Whoa, I just need to check this." You're the first one. So that's a really interesting one, actually. Yeah.
It is, and that's not necessarily something that people would necessarily know, because I think quite often people think, well, your skin is waterproof, and
Mm.
it's, I mean, I don't know if this is the right word,
And
but
in most
that's
cases, it is. Most people, it does a very good job of keeping water in. Let's just say that, of course. But yeah, I see exactly where you're coming from in that.
yeah. So that's a real big consideration. And I think just renovation dust, like I quite often find that my hair is just full of dust and it really dries it out, which to be honest kind of gives me beachy waves and I'm a bit into it. But it's it's not always the best.
Hmm.
Having your skin and your hair sort of filled with all of the dust of the renovation.
Yeah, so I mean that's great. Hair hydration is a thing as much as skin hydration is, and most people actually forget about their hair. They think, oh, it'll just use a hydrating shampoo. In some cases, your job makes it even more predisposed to drying out your hair and things like that. So I completely understand where you're coming from, and obviously there's a lot of hazards in your line of work as well, which are important to be aware of. So I've got a bit of an opening section, which I've termed "Learning About Emma." So in this section, we're going to go and delve into just learning more about you and your journey in the DIY world. And firstly, I think where my head kind of mostly went straight to was hands. I was like, hands, they must get kind of, abused by industrial pollutants and, things around the house nearly all the time. So how do you protect your hands when you're kind of at work, and be that products, materials, routines? Like, what do you tend to use? Or just a kind of good pair of gloves, potentially?
Mm. I mean, well, it starts with a good pair of gloves. I think I've sort of alluded to. I've not always been quite as disciplined as as
Hmm.
what might be good or ideal. But a good pair of gloves is a really good start, especially like I say, working with something like cement. You definitely need gloves. You don't want to work with your hands with something like that. Um,
Absolutely. And I don't want them coming into my clinic with cement poisoning, because I'll just give them the look.
you'd be like doing DIY, yeah, now building a wall. So yeah, starting with a good pair of gloves is always
Mm,
a great place to start. And for me, because my hands they go through quite a lot. Because obviously I do lots of building work, but I'm also a
of
climber, so my
course.
knees really get
Yeah,
beaten,
yeah.
calluses. Um, I'm a real fan of Vaseline. I
I mean, that's what we recommend a lot of the time. It's a great product, and you'll find a lot of dermatologists are recommending that online. So, we're happy to hear that. I think from our side of it, yeah. And what do you like about Vaseline so much? Is it the kind of barrier occlusive properties of it, I'm guessing?
I'm glad you said that because I
Mm,
use it without knowing if it's a good thing or not. So that's why when I asked, I'm like,
great thing.
Vaseline. What do I like about it? I mean, I find it really versatile. I'm more likely to just use Vaseline instead of lip balm. Um,
Mm,
for sort of hydrating my lips in like the winter. Um, I might use it on my hands, say overnight, either on my hands or my feet, just to sort of bring back a bit of life if they've been sort of been getting a bit battered by the elements. I've
yeah,
also
of
been
course.
used it on drawer slides to help get drawers into cupboards that don't fit anymore.
Ah, so a bit of a DIY hack there,
Oh
outside of
yeah,
the realm of just
yeah,
you're not applying it just to us, but to the materials as well. So I mean, that's a great hack.
yeah. My Vaseline's got all sorts of dips and troughs, and I've just been
Oh wow, yeah,
even stopping a squeak in a stair. If you've got like a stair that's really squeaky and you're able to get
okay.
to the back of it, if you just put some Vaseline in there, it stops the squeak from happening. It's only temporary just to stop it, but you
Did
can.
the developer of Vaseline ever just think about all of these different applications? It's one of those wonder products, isn't it? Where you kind of think, the best products, you find utility out of them in such weird places sometimes. That's what I find anyway. So it's great.
Yeah, I love it, and I always, for me personally, it's the product that's affordable, so I think that is
Absolutely.
really appealing.
And say if you just like put on a whole load of moisturizer onto your hands and then put gloves directly over the top of that, would that be a problem with your DIY work, or would that kind of work okay? Or does it make things? Do you feel a bit weird that, oh, my hands are too well moisturized and I've put my gloves on? I feel weird. Is that a thing?
Hmm, good question. I don't think I've ever done that. I think if I'm ever going to sort of really try and moisturize up my hands, I might do it at night. Put on some of
Mm.
those cotton gloves that make you look a little bit strange as you go to bed. It's a weird look. But I find the rest of the time, outside of doing DIY work where my hands are getting drier, I don't tend to use
Mm.
moisturizers at all. I tend to use it as and when it sort of feels necessary. I know that for some people it's like a regular part of
Mm.
their routine, and it's a great way to remember it if you need it, having a routine in place. But for me, I tend to use it in a very ad hoc way, as and when I think my hands deserve to be revitalized.
Absolutely. And a lot of people do it that way and they've got no skin problems and it works for them. And, we're not here to say, oh, this is right, this is wrong. I'm all about kind of discussion, especially with my patients when they come into clinic. We're not there to didactically tell people you're doing this wrong, do it this way. I think that makes for a bad doctor in a sense. So I kind of, I see what you're saying and it works for you and, kind of very practical based on your own routine and things. Have you ever had a DIY experiment just go hilariously wrong? And can you share what happened? I want to hear. This was one of the most interesting questions I could come up with. I was like, I wonder what she's going to say.
Well, I feel fortunate in that nothing has gone drastically wrong whilst I've been doing DIY, but I do recall a time trying to put up plasterboard by
Mm.
myself, and this is most definitely a two-person job. Lots of things you can get away with additional help. That said, if you've got this tool that you can buy that's on wheels that does actually help put up
Hmm.
plasterboard, technically you could do it by yourself, but um, plasterboard is about 25 kilograms and it's 2 meters wide and a meter and a half the other way. And trying to lift that up, put it onto the ceiling, and then get a screwdriver and a screw and put it. I don't know. I don't know what I was thinking. I mean, I managed
That
to get it.
sounds like a two-person job. You're still here, which is good. I mean, you've survived the precariousness of a plasterboard incident.
I
Um,
yeah, just find yourself. I just found myself at one point holding it up in the ceiling and just
yeah.
looking at the drill on the floor and the screws in my pockets and being like, okay, what do I do now?
You see, I've done that with a TV before, and I've just been like, when you're putting it up, and you're just like, okay, I'm missing two pairs of hands here. Then I put the TV down, go and get some help, and say, I actually need help to put a TV up. So I've kind of been in a similar situation, maybe, but probably with a more expensive product in that sense. You drop a TV, and then don't want to have to spend another 2K on that. Um, what's the worst mistake you've seen someone doing DIY commit? And what was the outcome? Have you seen any kind of complete blunders?
I love this question, and because I do see a lot of this. I see a lot of this because so much of the ethos of my channel is helping people um, to learn to be okay with making mistakes, because mistakes are not very well tolerated in
Mm,
society in general. But they're normal, to to make errors is human. It's like a really innate part of our.
absolutely.
It's how we learn. It's how we practice. It's how we get better. And sometimes making mistakes or failure are even better lessons than we could learn from doing it right first time. And so I see a lot of that content come up on my feed because I'm looking for people that are not only making mistakes but having the courage to publish it, because I'll go and really hype them up and be like, well done, you did great, you recovered from this thing. But probably the one that I saw um, that was probably the most dangerous was there was this trend a little while back where you would find a lamp and cut off the cable, the wire to plug it in, and then change out the
Okay.
bulb to a remote controlled light. It
Right. Okay.
was kind of a trend that would allow you to be able to put a light anywhere basically, and you could um, use a remote control. It's kind of
I'm trying to think what the dangerous is. It the cutting of you shouldn't cut the cable off? Is that are they electrocuted themselves or something? That's what I'm thinking.
well, I don't want to give you any spoilers, but basically, this is what happens. So there's nothing wrong with um, cutting that wire off. Obviously, you would unlikely be able to rewire it again and use it as a lamp in that way again. But
Mm,
um, the person who was doing this cut off the wire whilst it was still plugged into the wall, and so of course, current going through that wire. Now, in most houses, um, you have a circuit breaker, usually somewhere near your front door, on a utility cupboard, a garage, under the stairs, maybe. And that circuit breaker's job is to switch off. If you've ever had the lights go off in your house
yeah,
suddenly,
that box which I've had to go up to and switch it back on again. That's the one you're talking about.
yeah, and you're
So
like, I
I'm a
don't know,
complete layman here, so I'm going to be describing it in the most blunt way. I think, yeah, I know
no,
what you're talking about there. Yeah.
it's exactly that. And so, it might be that it keeps tripping and you discover that your toaster's gone a bit haywire or something like that.
Mm,
But what happened when she cut through it was that the functionality of that circuit breaker is to stop the electricity before somebody gets shocked, and so the switch trips, and
Yeah.
so she was fine. She didn't get electrocuted, and she was, obviously a little bit shaken, but she had put this video online to sort of show people that it had happened as a way to try and help other people from encountering that same sort of mistake. And obviously, people in the comments were mostly supportive, but lots of very, very mean people as well.
Yeah.
Because people, it's a skill, I think, to sort of learn how to tolerate mistakes. If you've always been told mistakes aren't okay, then
Absolutely. Don't get yourself electrocuted, kids. I reckon there was a lot of that
do that.
lightning emoji maybe in those comment sections there. But people can be terrible in comments as well, like the negativity sometimes there. But it takes a lot of bravery, doesn't it, to come out and show that what the blunder that you've made, and to warn people, I guess, as well, isn't it, from that aspect?
It really does.
Has your audience ever spoken about kind of problems with their skin? And if so, kind of what have they said? Have you ever got anything like this or not?
So the actually the cement poisoning that I mentioned, I've had a few people mention
Yep.
uh, that. Sometimes they've mentioned it in the context of saying to me, Emma, you should be wearing better gloves. You might get cement poisoning. And I'm like, you're
And
absolutely right. Thank you
I
for
think they're
sharing.
forming a queue outside of my clinic right now, actually. I've got 4 cement poisonings coming in. Just now, I'm joking. Okay, yeah, no, of course, yeah. Okay,
So
so that's a big one then.
definitely that, and I guess for some people, people quite like to have nice looking hands. Perhaps they like to, like me, I do like to do my nails, but sometimes you do feel like you have to choose between having nice looking hands and nails and having them look a little bit scruffy. And when you're doing
You've
DIY all the
got
time,
you've got the devil and the angel on your shoulders telling you different things like, oh, I want pretty hands. Oh no, but you want to be really good at DIY. But no, you want pretty hands. It's difficult, isn't it? I can see the
really,
temptations.
it really is like that. It's like I want to grow my nails out and have them really long, and then the other side's like, well, that's just impractical. How are you going to even account?
Okay, so I suppose there's a dilemma sometimes in people kind of responding to you and saying, how do I find that balance then? Like, how do I keep, myself, my nails looking pretty whilst also being good at DIY? And
Yeah.
what is the answer to that? Is it just you have to sacrifice, or is there a way to do it without sacrificing?
I think, for me, I find like just adding moisturizer or making sure that if they have gotten dry, looking after them in that way, and just to give them a bit more attention, to perhaps use
Absolutely.
nail brush, using a nail brush
Yeah.
and things like that, just to when you're doing very dirty work, it can really get into your cuticles and things like that. Or cuticle creams I use quite often.
Okay,
Um,
that's a good one. A lot of the time, it's just the simple advice, really, is that nighttime, make sure that you moisturize your hands, put on a pair of cotton gloves if you need it, if you're predisposed to dry hands. Then you set yourself up for the day ahead, right? And then put yourself in a position where you can get along with your DIY quite in a better state.
yeah,
Um,
the forward
but
planning.
I suppose, yeah, I mean, if you've got like massive nails, that I'm sure that interferes. At what stage does it get too much? Do you think, well, that person's nails are just way too big. How are they doing any DIY? Or is it like, can it get quite long before you have those problems?
Well, I'd love someone to tell me because I'm very sure that you could do most things, but it might just take a little bit longer as you try and try and navigate.
Well, do you know what? We need to get the cast of RuPaul's Drag Race on next time, and I need to ask them that
That'd be
question.
amazing. I feel
One
like
one who likes DIY. I don't know which one that would be, but yeah, maybe they've got the answers.
I can't
But an
probably do
interesting one.
more just with some like minor adjustments. You just maybe a higher risk of breaking a nail, but it's all about the forward planning. And just as you were talking, actually, it made me think of like full body overalls. If you're going up in the loft or something, you don't want to be getting the fiberglass from the insulation in your loft all in your skin.
Mm.
It feels horrible. It's really itchy. So doing the forward planning and just wearing something that's completely covers you is really going to pay off later down the
And that
road.
fiberglass penetrates quite deeply. Is it quite a potent penetrator of the skin? I wonder. Um,
Yeah, well, I think I'm right in saying that it's a very 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 fine um fiber. Would it be a fiber?
Yeah,
But it's you find that you couldn't rub it off, but you feel that sense of irritation and itching, and
of
um,
course.
it just sort of stays with you, and it takes a bit of time
So
for it to just
potentially quite an irritant substance.
yeah.
And thankfully, to be honest, in my practice, relatively few people come in with irritant contact irritation, which is, quite a good thing, really. Or maybe that's just because we're overloaded with skin cancer at the moment, so that's kind of all we see most of the time. But yeah, luckily, contact irritation. I'm sure it is quite prevalent, but not too much that I've seen from my side of things.
That's
Um,
good.
shall we move on to the quiz rounds? Are you ready for the quiz round? Bit
I'm
of
ready.
quizzing action.
So ready.
And right, so this I don't know how this is going to go. We'll see. It could go terribly. First off, question: how many skincare enthusiasts does it take to change a light bulb? Can you think what's the answer to that, Emma?
Mm, I don't know. I don't know. What is it?
Emma, the light bulb's already on the ground. It's been broken. They used too much moisturizer. It slipped out of their hands. Psh, it's gone. So sadly, a bad answer there. A bad outcome.
All I can imagine
Um,
is they'd be too busy like doing pimple popping or something, which is
that'd be me. My light bulb will be broken on the ground. I'll be too busy doing whatever it is. I'd be too busy with doing my pimple popping reactions to actually think about like, oh god, bulb's gone. Yeah, so that'll probably be me.
my food.
When was the last time I replaced a light bulb as well? It's been a while. Um, Pretty good few months. I've had a lucky period.
Well, that's probably, have you got energy saving light bulbs? Because they last a lot longer. If
Yes, I do.
there we
That's
go.
the reason. Um, so I'm going to play you three sounds, and so in each case there's going to be a tool which produces that particular sound. Um, can you name that tool? That's going to be the question. And hopefully this isn't like too unfair, not too hard for you. And hopefully it works. I've got my laptop here with me, and just let me know if you can hear this okay. So we're going to start off with number one.
Is it a hammer?
Yes. Is that loud enough for you? Can you tell?
Yeah, I can just about hear it. Yeah,
I'll put my laptop a bit close. Let me just 1 second. Okay, so you've got 1 out of 1 so far. That's a great start.
I'm quietly confident. Maybe I shouldn't
You're
get
quietly confident. Let
too
me just
ahead of
try not to ruin it by showing you the screen here. But
myself.
okay, we've got number two. It's going to get harder.
Mm. It sounds like a wrench, like a
Oh my
span.
god, absolutely. Yep, wrench it is. Or I would have given you spanner. I think both of those would have gone to your point. So 2 out of 2. You've already. Well, this last one, it may be a little bit unfair, but we're going to go for it. Like, there's an off chance that you may, you may get this, but let's go for it. 3 out of 3 here. What's this last one going to be? Do you want that again?
Yeah,
Would
let's
that
do that
help?
again.
Let's just do that again. Yeah.
Uh, is it maybe like a nail gun or something like that?
Ooh, close. I mean, that's a hard one. It was basically a clamp on the edge of, like, it's called a Mandeville clamp. I don't know.
Is it
Like, that means nothing to me. You
tightening?
clamp something, yeah, towards the end of, so it's like, that loose bit when you clamp something first and then you tighten it, then it gets tight.
Oh,
I think that
is it
sound
when
was the
you
loose bit.
pull the
Yeah.
handle?
Have you heard of a Mandeville clamp? I mean, for me, that means gibberish to me, but to you, I mean, maybe it's a thing.
I mean, it's probably something that I know by a different name. They seem to call the same tool about five different things, so I'm sure I'd recognise it if I saw it. But two out of
Probably
three.
in different parts of them. That's still, that's great. Like, that was so harsh, that final one. I was just like, can I,
That's good.
I was deliberately thinking, can I do one sound which may flummox her a little bit? And it probably was the clamp sound because, I mean, how many people use a clamp while they're doing DIY? It's not a common, is it a common instrument? I'm not
I
sure.
think so. To be honest, when
It's
you
like,
mentioned it was a clamp, I was like, oh, yeah, I can see that was a clamp. I think that was a fair question. 2 out of
yeah,
3.
okay. I don't feel too harsh now for giving you
No.
too harsh a question, really. Um, Excellent. So the final question of one more question in the quiz rounds, and it's going to relate to me actually. If you can guess, so there are going to be four options here, and one of them is a piece of DIY that Sina has actually done. So one of these I've done, the rest I haven't done. But can you tell which one? So the first one: A, build my own computer. B, fix the plumbing in my flat. C, build a clothing cabinet from individual component parts. Or D, erect a wall in my parents' garden. Which one is it going to be?
Well, this is a tough
Uh,
one because I'm positive that you could do all 4 of those. So I'm gonna.
I'm not. I don't know if I can.
Oh, you know, oh, I feel super confident. Um, hmm. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go for D.
Erect a wall in my parents' garden. You think I've done that?
I do, yeah.
That's I suppose there is some partial truth in this, in that I did partially erect a wall when I was 10 years old in my neighbour's. I was doing some work for my neighbour, so I did partially do that. So we'll give you half a point there. But the answer actually it was A, build my own computer. That's the one I've actually done, and the rest, unfortunately, I haven't got around to. But I may do after this podcast. Actually, give me some inspo to go and to fix a clothing cabinet and do the plumbing in my flat.
This is the funny thing because I always talk about DIY and that's what I teach people, but like my content isn't really about DIY at all. It's about helping
Yeah.
people have that transformational experience from thinking that they can't do something to realizing that they can, because you can apply that to literally any part of your life. So like the building of the computer is the same as fixing the pipes because it's all about problem solving, putting things together. Oh, that's not the right piece, or I need to go and get a different piece. So I'm not at all surprised that you.
Absolutely. Yeah, logistics. It's all processes at the end of the day, if you think about it, isn't it? I mean, some of them require a bit more bicep curl, but um, they're all processes. And no, absolutely, like I've seen some of your videos and the plumbing one as well. How when you blocked your sink, a very succinctly explained short video, and it's perfect for that, isn't it? Really, and so many people find utility out of it, which is absolutely amazing.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, quiz rounds, you've done pretty well there. I'd give you that's 2.5 points. I don't know what we're scoring it out of actually. There's no upper limit, but no, I'd say you've done really well there. Now I'm going to do a part called the question, which I asked to all of my guests on this show. And so it's basically you're stranded on a desert island. What's the one skincare product that you would take to the desert island with you? And this is assuming that you've already had adequate sun protection. Because I'm assuming that most people just say, oh, sun protection. Yeah, of course, that one. And why would you take it? So anything but sunscreen.
Well, I'm gonna bring back out a superhero from earlier in our conversation, in that it would have to be Vaseline.
Oh, yes. I knew you were going to say that. I knew it. Yeah, that's fair enough.
Yeah, it's
Absolutely.
coming. But
Good old Vaseline.
good old Vaseline. I mean, obviously, Vaseline's a brand name. Any sort of petroleum jelly would do the job for me. Happy with anything. Um, because you could just use it for anything. I'm just trying to think about all the things that you
Mm.
could, not even skincare related. In I don't know. I can't
I
even.
mean, when you're doing that cabinet on a desert island, that would be. In fact, if I was stranded on a desert island, you could pick any part. I'd be like, Emma, this desert island needs to be a desert mansion, and you would be the person to go to for that. Whereas me, I'd be like Robinson Crusoe. Well, actually, no, he was quite adept at fixing things, wasn't he? I would just be sat chilling on the side, just being like, well, I can do skin, but everything else around me is there. I'd be the worst.
Well, if you were like a skin superhero, I think the Vaseline would be like your your like superpower or something. Could be like.
Vaseline would be my superpower. Keeping people's skin moisturized would be my superpower. Um, but yeah, so that's great. So we're going to wrap up the show now shortly, and just one last question for you, Emma. Um, who is one hero in the DIY world who inspired you growing up, and you think could inspire many others to come? Who would you select?
Hmm. Well, I think probably my personal hero would be my dad and my granddad. So there may not be much
Mhm.
benefit to other people following them, but because they and actually I would include my grandmother in that as well, because the three of them were people who didn't directly teach me DIY. We never sat down to learn things together, but
Yeah,
they did things. They were very practical. They just got on with it. They worked out how to solve things. And I watched and I observed and I saw those things. And so when it came to like putting up my first bit of wallpaper, I didn't think to myself, I probably can't do this. I'm like, well, I saw my dad do it, so I'll be able to do it. Like it wasn't even a question. So
yeah, yeah.
I think for me, my grandparents and my dad have been my personal inspiration.
That's such
Um,
a beautiful answer. You couldn't have picked a better answer than that. Sack all those celebrity or fake celebrity people. And my dad, my nan. It's just like,
well,
yeah, no, that's a
absolutely.
completely reasonable. Yeah, absolutely, a great answer there. Um, Excellent. So just before we kind of sign off, just remind our listeners where to find you on the glorious World Wide Web. Any handles you want to drop? You can feel free to plug it now.
Well, so I'm DIY with Emma, and you can find me pretty much anywhere under that handle on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram, all of the places. And very excitingly, this year, I'm actually going to be launching a clothing brand for workwear so that when you go up to your loft, you don't have to get your skin covered in fiberglass. You can have that actually fit you. It's specifically designed for the female fit, so it's going to be to try and serve an underserved audience.
Absolutely. And what's it going to be called, or have you thought about a name yet for it?
Still haven't decided this. So TBC, we don't know yet what that's going to be, so I've got no handles to give you, but that is in the works, and that's something that hopefully people will be able to benefit from by the end of the year.
Absolutely. And we look forward to it. And so just from my side as well, just dropping my handles at Dr. Sina Skin on YouTube and at Dr. Sina Gadiri on Instagram and TikTok. It's been a pleasure to host. This is the very first episode of Skin Talks. And I hope we get positive feedback from this and people want to have more episodes and find me talking to, you know, whoever's out there really. Like I'm happy to be open to suggestions in the future. And it's just been great talking to you today. And thanks so, so much for coming on. And I'm sure that, I could learn so much more from your channel. And I just look forward to speaking again, really, in the future. And I hope everyone's enjoyed this episode. So it's been great having you, Emma, and
Thank you
look
so
forward to
much.
seeing you soon. No worries.
Bye.